Hello, this is the Maya Artifact episode number 3574. Today's date is September 5, 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 8 a.m., 8:02 a.m. Alright, let's just kind of like ask bunch of questions. Alright, yeah. Okay, question is, what are the best way to communicate with customer? Okay, what are the best way to communicate with the customer? Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? All right. Okay, this question is with a business and startup. Uh, I am kind of like asking this question to myself is because of that I am completely unaware of that. Um, I am not graduate person. I didn't really did any kind of like a studies in business, nothing really at all. In the future, I wanted to establish that business, and before that I need to aware of everything what will gonna happen and what kind of like a problem that I will gonna face, and I don't know. Okay, it's kind of like gonna be essential for me. So that's why I'm actually asking bunch of questions to myself so that I might gonna aware and I'm gonna understand what is actually situation that I will gonna face. All right, yeah. Now regarding about this question is mostly associated with the customer services. Customer services is a very much essential kind of like a completely topic regarding about how does customer feel satisfied when they're using your product and services, right? Okay, now question is that okay, uh, what are the effective ways, sorry, okay, what are the best way to communicate with the customer? Okay, yeah. Best way to communicate, what is exactly best way to communicate, what is exactly is this thing? Okay, yeah. uh, Basically is this thing ki customer means like that ki people kind of like simply buy some sort of stuff from you. Oh yeah, a kind of like a product or services, those people called as a customer. Okay, yeah. And if there is a kind of like a problem happened, they will kind of like reach out to you with a email, WhatsApp, call, lot of things. All right, yeah. Now important thing is that how do you communicate with those people, how do you interact with those kind of like people, because it's essential. Oh yeah, obviously they will gonna face little bit problem while they are using your product and services. Okay, yeah. So it's my job to kind of like a simply when they using my product and services, the experience should supposed to be smooth, and that experience should supposed to be smooth started from the customer services, the way that I handle the customer, that is, yeah. Now basically customer services is mostly, if I'm gonna say that e-commerce website, for that e-commerce website customer service is really essential, like Amazon, Flipkart. Like e-commerce website means the people who kind of like selling stuff in the website. I am not selling any kind of like a stuff. I am kind of like a simply providing services. Okay, I'm online services. So regarding about that, there is a kind of like a some problem who kind of like a face, I would have to solve this problem. Okay. So how do I supposed to solve this problem? How do I supposed to communicate with my customer, with the people? How do I supposed to use this thing? Well, first of all is that as I mentioned, I wanted to establish, wait for a minute. Okay, yeah. So what is actually best way to communicate with my customer? The problem is that, okay, let me explain what is actually the services that I am gonna providing. Okay, I am actually building an app. Okay, I actually mentioned regarding about my app multiple times in Artifact episode, in previous Artifact episode. But for the this question really required the information. Okay, regarding about my application. So I'm going to mention that. So I'm gonna build the app. My application is a kind of like a name as an Artifact. What does my application do? It kind of like a simply record the thoughts. Okay, it's so vague and not really understanding now. Okay, so people actually kind of like a wrote the diary every single day. Okay, so this is what exactly is it. People instead of writing the diary, they are kind of like a recording the diary. Okay, instead of that recording diary, a recording artifact. Okay, means like that whatever exactly happened in their life, they actually talk about stuff and stuff and stuff and like that. Okay, and the whatever the people talk in my platform, it's called Artifact episode. Okay, now my application is a kind of like a something like YouTube. Okay, in the YouTube platform, people are kind of like a something the record the video, upload the video on their platform, YouTube platform. Same thing happen. Okay, in my application, people are kind of like a something the record their artifact, upload their artifact in platform, in my platform. Okay, and other people will gonna listen. Now there is a one catch here is that key this is a kind of like a few thoughts that I'm recording very personal. So probably I am making sure that it should supposed to be private, right? Yeah. So that is what I'm bitterly concerned. So basically it's this thing na ki my application is kind of like a provide a privacy means like that ki uh, like the handle or account should not be created by their real name, nothing really at all. Basically is this thing your detail does not publish anywhere on that particular artifact platform, nothing really at all. It's a kind of like a random username, stuff like that. You have to choose this your username and things like that. As well as while recording artifact at spur of the moment, you might gonna mention your name and things like that. So um, the AI, like basically my application is actually powered by AI, which kind of like a simply add a beep in that particular point where you kind of like a mention particular your name or detail of things, and that it kind of like add a beep or mute their particular segment. Okay, so that privacy should supposed to be maintained. Okay, first of all, why privacy is because of that people are actually kind of like assembly like it's essential na? Like basically like if you're writing the diary, you are making sure that no one is kind of like a read that diary. Same thing happen. Okay, like as you are recording the artifact, so basically you wanted to make sure that no one kind of like a something know about you, huh? Like basically they will gonna know about your story, what exactly happened with you, this and that and that, but they will not gonna know your name. Okay, so which is kind of like a something you are sharing your thoughts, but try to be control, try to be kind of like a make it little bit of like a vigilant. Okay, vigilant, sorry, like a kind of like a something hidden or things like that. Okay, so privacy is very very much essential. Okay, in my application. Now the problem is that sometimes this is kind of like only as I mentioned, my platform is powered by AI and things like that. So there might be kind of like some certain mistake happen. Okay, that is for sure. Okay, so how do I supposed to be kind of like a simply control this thing? Like basically if there is a kind of like a fucked up happen, mistake happen, then how do I supposed to control that? How do I supposed to like a things like basically there is a person who kind of like a mention their name by spur of the moment, and the AI didn't really work that well properly, and listener might gonna knew him, or so that kind of like a particular person has a kind of like a something how understand that he kind of like a something mention his name and things like that. So he was bitterly furious. So he doesn't want to kind of like a something reveal his name, reveal his name and things like that. So how does that particular person solve his own problem? First of all is that ki how this kind of like a process happened, let me clarify. Okay, yeah. So first of all is that okay, when the people who kind of like simply record their artifact, they kind of like simply publish their artifact in my platform. Before it went to public, it kind of like a go through multiple process. Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, my application powered by AI. So basically what is happened that ki whatever you kind of like a simply mention, whatever you kind of like a speak, it convert into the subtitle. Okay, yeah. When that like basically yeah, it converted into subtitle. Now basically AI will kind of like read the entire subtitle and kind of like figure it out which one is noun. Which one is noun means which one is name or things or that or that. Okay, yeah. When AI found that particular this is the name and things like that with the timestamp and serial number and things like that, AI will mute that particular segment or add a beep over that particular segment so that listener might not gonna kind of like a something knew that who you are. By the way, the exact process what exactly happened in user interface is that ki when the people who kind of like upload their upload their artifact in my platform, so artifact is kind of like assembly went through multiple process. Okay, yeah, and in that particular process before it went to public, it kind of like a show that ki this is the kind of like some name that we found that you kind of like a mention in the artifact. Okay, yeah, and we are kind of like a beeping over there. If you wanted to kind of like a something even more like if you are kind of like a something even more kind of like a something something like that key problem, even if you are kind of like a things that key there is some sort of kind of like a things that we don't really found it. So look at the entire subtitle. If there is a kind of like a somebody name that you found that kind of like a we should supposed to be added the beep, so we can put that. So basically if the user kind of like a go through and things like that, okay, at this point I kind of like a mention particular name and things like that, so he that particular person click that thing and particular segment, he will select that particular segment and mute that thing. Okay, yeah. So which is kind of like a something the process. Okay, as like basically this thing the AI will kind of like only first of all figure it out all the names and things like that, and as well as I am also giving user to kind of like a select what kind of like a segment that you wanted to kind of like a share or not or things like that. Okay, yeah, or mute or things like that. So which is kind of like a somebody very much like a user will control everything regarding about what they will say and things like that. Okay, when the user are literally kind of like a confirm and things like that ki, yeah, like this is the kind of like a good, let's just publish that artifact, then that artifact will kind of like a went into the platform. All right, yeah. So this is kind of like a assembly problem. When the user is actually have a problem, then I'm making sure that the user kind of like a solve his own problem. Like basically he would not gonna call me and kind of like a say this thing that on this timestamp I kind of like a mention my name and this and that. No, like basically I'm giving them kind of like a user as opportunity that whenever that particular artifact you kind of like a somebody control the things and that you wanted to add something beeps or things like that, you can do it by yourself. Okay, yeah, you don't have to call and things like that because it's kind of like a bit more easier way and bits more kind of like a somebody very conventional way, and as also bit more transparency because user will control everything. Okay, so this is gonna one thing. Now after all those things there is might be kind of like a problem happened regarding about stuff and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, at the moment I'm not really sure what we're gonna problem I will gonna face in the customer services, but I'm making sure that little less problem I will gonna face, or maybe kind of like assembly the problem that I face I will gonna control that thing. I don't know what kind of like a problem that I will gonna face. Okay, yeah. But there is a one thing that I wanted to do it to see. Okay, yeah, is that like a like basically is this thing instead of kind of like a fixing the problem in the post means like that after the record and things like that, I would kind of like a simply talk to the people or talk to the user that at least control your like basically is the thing when you are recording artifact, make sure that do not mention your name or things like that. It's kind of like a simply way much easier to kind of like a simply let that mistake would not gonna happen at the first time. Okay, yeah. So it kind of like a bit more control. If I kind of like a mention the people that like a private yourself, do not mention your name and things and that. So it kind of like a bit more things might be way much easier. After all those things might be happen for that thing. Customer services is actually available for all the kind of like a query should supposed to be solved. Okay, yeah. Now what is exactly I think that customer services, it's something that na ki it's essential. It kind of like a somebody solve the problem that what exactly customer is actually facing this thing and that. Okay, yeah. Now what is exactly I'm literally focused on, I'm literally focused on that ki uh, artifact. Okay, yeah, means like that ki the people who kind of like us may record the artifact. Okay, yeah, it's not gonna kind of like a thing is that you are kind of like a mention regarding about what exactly happened your day and things and that. Yeah, like at the beginning you might gonna start doing this thing, but it will kind of like a really bore and things like that. Okay, yeah, I am actually recording artifact for last almost like a 10 year, almost like a decade. Okay. And I have kind of like a somebody little bit understand how do I supposed to be record, how do I supposed to be record such an artifact that kind of like add benefit in to myself and things like that. So that's why I'm kind of like asking this question to myself regarding about business, so that I would come completely aware of not only kind of like a sort of business point of perspective, but as well as my communication skills is improved, the way that I talk with myself is also really improved and things like that. Okay, yeah. So I will gonna kind of like a talk to the user in kind of like a some any event or things like that. That okay, how do you supposed to record the artifact? How do you like a, how much kind of like a sort of benefit that you will gonna get if you kind of like ask this question, if you're gonna do this thing question and that, how it kind of like a somebody add value and things like that. Okay. In customer services, communication is very essential factor. Yeah, if you can't communicate properly you can't run the business. And I think that na ki for me, I always have kind of like a problem with the communication. I am kind of like a very introvert person. I was introvert person, yes, I was introvert person. Okay, yeah. And I wanted to kind of like a something that ki like because of the introvert person I am kind of like very lack of communication. But I don't want that kind of like a things that should supposed to be carry forward. I wanted to kind of like communicate as much as people as I can. Okay, like basically I am actually working on my communication so that I would kind of like do the very effective communicate with the people around me. Okay, not only people around me but kind of like a somebody to my user, because in the end those user are kind of like a somebody very much essential for me. Okay, yeah. and and if I try to communicate what exactly is this thing, what exactly artifact and this and that, but dude, why are you kind of like a mention, why are you kind of like a talk about the artifact and things like that? The user might understand very well na regarding about what exactly artifact and things like that. Well, it's kind of like a something very easy to understand. Okay, that key what is actually artifact and what should we supposed to be record and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. But the it is also really hard to understand at the same time. Okay, yeah, because it's a lot of thing happen. Okay, let me tell you one thing. um when I record the artifact, okay, obviously there is no kind of like a listening right now. Okay, and okay, if you are kind of like a listening on YouTube platform, like basically I legitly upload my artifact on YouTube platform. Okay, yeah. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that he like basically is this thing, no one is actually listening right now. Or maybe you are kind of like a listening is because of that key you probably knew me. Okay, you probably already knew me, who am I, what am I, and because of you wanted to know more about me, so that's why you are kind of like somebody listening this thing. What is exactly what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key the ask this question to yourself: why are you recording my artifact, my artifact on YouTube platform? In like, why are you kind of like a recording artifact? Why are you kind of like a recording? Why are you kind of like a listening this thing on? Like, why? Obviously, you are that kind of like a particular person. You are kind of like a somebody wanted to know me or wanted to understand me, so that's why you are kind of like a listening my artifact, probably, right? Yeah, like basically I already created some sort of persona, and because of you are kind of like somebody unaware that ki how do I suppose like how I created that kind of like somebody persona, and so that's why you are kind of like a listening this artifact or things like that. Okay, yeah. What exactly is this thing that ki you probably knew me, so that's why you're kind of like a listening this thing, right? Let's just say that ki if I'm gonna say Shah Rukh Khan is kind of like a recording the artifact, so probably I would kind of like listen the Shah Rukh Khan, because Shah Rukh Khan is not a random person. I already knew him and kind of like a things. I already built up the relation with Shah Rukh Khan, so that's why I wanted to know and things like that. Okay, yeah. but even the user will gonna record the artifact, this is very different situation. The user doesn't really know who are them. Like basically is this thing, let's just imagine there is a kind of like a particular person from, let's just say, Delhi. Okay, yeah. So there is a particular person who's kind of like a recording artifact regarding about stuff and like that. Now you don't know about who's that person. Okay, yeah. Like basically other person is kind of like a listening, they don't know who are you and things like that. Okay, yeah. The only way that particular person, like the only way that particular person is judged by the kind of like only way that particular person talk or things like that. Okay, yeah. And this is the only way to kind of like things happen. Now what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that let's just kind of like simply imagine a scenario. Okay, yeah. So there is a kind of like a something, the girl or boy or kind of like somebody recording the artifact regarding of stuff and stuff. Okay, yeah. In Delhi, and there is another guy who is actually kind of like listening your artifact in from Tamil Nadu. Okay, yeah. So basically, what is actually happened na ki when that particular person, like I already mentioned this kind of like some example in previous artifact episode regarding about when the girl is kind of like a recording artifact and kind of like the people who kind of like listening things like that. I mentioned this thing multiple times. The example, what is kind of like something, how much it impact on things like that. Okay, so but still I'm gonna mention. Okay, yeah, like I'm kind of like repeating all those things again and again because last artifact I kind of like mentioned this thing, but still again for the sake of this question, let's just imagine that the girl from Chandigarh, she kind of like record the artifact regarding about she first time she had a kiss with a boy. Okay, yeah. Obviously kind of like everything is kind of like something hidden. Okay, but at like basically is this thing na ki basically what is actually happened that ki how do I supposed to say. Okay, yeah. So she kind of like mentioned regarding about that she had a kiss with a boy and things like that. Okay, yeah. She's a teenager by the way. Okay, yeah. Now there is a guy who is kind of like there is a guy from Gujarat and who is kind of like following her for almost like a maybe year. Okay, and that particular guy is kind of like a fallen for her. He only kind of like listen her voices and that's it. Okay, but this is the first time he was kind of like somebody listen that she kind of like kissed the boy and things and that. And basically while she was kind of like recording the artifact, she mentioned some of the names about things and that. Okay, I just put up the moment. Now what is actually happened that sometimes like as I mentioned, my application or my platform is powered by AI, and sometimes it doesn't really work, and sometimes it didn't really work, and basically is this thing that entire detail is kind of like somebody published on the public. Okay, yeah. And the guy from the Gujarat is kind of like understand who is that girl and things like that. That particular guy will kind of like find her from the Instagram platform or anything everywhere and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now when this thing happened, then that particular person from the Gujarat kind of like do little bit of harassment to her that I know her, I know you and things and that and stuff like that. It violated the privacy. Okay, yeah. So and because of this thing happened, it just very fucked up situation happened. Okay, yeah. I know it's a very very critical situation. Okay, yeah. And I would do everything to kind of like control that this would not gonna happen. Okay, yeah. But obviously I am also a person. My platform is a machine, and sometimes they do little bit of mistakes too. Okay, yeah. So what would I supposed to do if I'm kind of like somebody make sure that the artifact is kind of like somebody helping them or kind of like somebody improving them or it kind of like add value on them? So how do I supposed to kind of like somebody control this thing even if like before it happened? Communication. Okay, like basically as a kind of like a somebody chairman, I would kind of like communicate with the user at particular event or things like that. Like if you are trying to communicate, private yourself, do not public yourself, like do not kind of like mention your name and things. Like basically I would kind of like simply generate the tagline. Okay, yeah. So that people will understand and stuff like that. Okay, so like basically my motto is that while recording the artifact, that particular person did not mention her name or things like that. This might be kind of like a far more easier way to kind of like simply solve the problem before it's kind of like created and things like that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so this is how I kind of like simply communicate with the customer or user. Okay. By the way, like identity, like these are kind of like assembly the kind of like stuff that I mentioned regarding about the kind of like how would I do. But regarding about communicating communicate with the user is kind of like assembly very different way. Like basically I would kind of like do that key call, WhatsApp or email. These are kind of like a some way that I communicate with people or users so that they would kind of like solve the problem. Another thing is that key being really polite and things like that. Okay, yeah. And and basically is this thing that key whatever the problem that they are actually facing, um I don't know. Like basically, is this thing at the time I'm kind of like actually thinking about only this problem, that only this kind of like a things that key I would kind of like a solve this problem in this way and that way kind of like a thing. But still, I think that na ki I am kind of like somebody. I don't know what will gonna happen in the future. Okay, yeah. Problem is not kind of like a things that you already understand, and like I would kind of like control the problem before it's kind of like arise and things like that. But still, it's like I can't I didn't really knew I don't know what will be the problem. Okay, yeah. It's a very big responsibility because for me to kind of like make them private or things like that. So that is also issue too. Okay, yeah. But uh, I know I could do that. Okay, but still there is a couple of problem that I might gonna know, and I will gonna figure it out. All right, yeah. So this is kind of like only stuff. This is kind of like something the best way to communicate with the customer probably. Okay, yeah. Like regarding about the practical answer regarding about how do I supposed to best way to communicate through phone, WhatsApp, email. Okay, yeah. The way that I communicate, yeah. This is the kind of like assembly way the things like that. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of like assembly the stuff that I mentioned regarding about stuff. All right, and thank you.